Okay, so bringing DevOps principles to controls and audits, not the most exciting title in the world, but I'm actually going to be talking about a revolution. So what I'm talking about today is an open source project that me and my colleagues at Container Solutions are working on. And my goal is that by the end of it, you'll be interested enough to check it out, perhaps give feedback, maybe even get involved. So we've just hit an important milestone with this. We've just got our first customer looking at hiring us to improve this open source project that we've built. To the point where we're thinking about pivoting. So Container Solutions is a cloud-native consultancy. So my day job is to help organizations build and run software in a cloud-native fashion. Doesn't necessarily mean in the cloud, but in a cloud-native fashion. And we accidentally built this project. I'll talk about how we got here later on, but we accidentally built this product, and it's being very well received. So I'm going to be asking a lot of questions of the audience today, because I'm curious who wants, after lunch on the last day of a conference, to come and listen to a talk about compliance. It's not many people, but there's lots of people here, so that's great. Okay, so I'm guessing, this is QCon, so I'm guessing a lot of people are heads-down developers. So if you are a heads-down developer, I just want a code type person, raise your hand. Okay, that's about less than I thought, actually, about 20% in the room. Now, who here works in a regulated industry? Oh, okay. Yeah, figures. Now, of those people, which are not working in a non-financial regulated industry? Oh, still quite a few. Wow, about 15, 20. Okay. It's interesting because one of the challenges of building something like this is that large financial institutions, as many of you will know, are very conservative about using an open source project or just doing something new. They'd rather buy off the big people. So what we found was that we've actually hit a vein in Internet of Things companies. So I don't know what the people who are non-financial, I'm guessing healthcare is probably a big one. But we found that there's a companies, for example, that work in oil and gas who do telemetry, for example, on gas tanks. So it's very important they don't blow up. So it's very important they're compliant. And traditionally, this has been done by people wielding a hammer and looking at big metal objects and figuring out if they're safe or not. And increasingly, that's being automated too. And we're going to get onto that. So of the people in this room who work in a regulated industry, how many have created or contributed to a Confluence page or a spreadsheet related to controls? Oh yes, lots of people. I did a lightning talk yesterday and no one put their hands up and I was a bit baffled. Okay, so you're the people I'm trying to address because as cloud native engineers, we got terribly frustrated with this. And I'll talk about how we got here, but the lack of automation in this space is very significant for us. And we think it should be solved. Okay, I'm assuming you don't like to do that kind of activity. I'm just going to take that as read. So here's my argument for today. The way we manage compliance is wrong and is changing. Incidentally, I studied history as my first degree. How many people in this room recognize that figure? Okay, the education system half works, it seems. So for those who don't know, it's from over 100 years ago, so it's quite understandable if you don't know it, but that's Lenin, the leader of the Soviet Revolution. And Lenin, I found out recently, went to the Duma, the parliament in Russia, and started the revolution, but he had to take a tram to get there. So I think of Lenin as complying with the rules and regulations and buying a ticket with however many kopecks it was, and meekly going along to the doomer and taking over a huge continent. So I'm going to talk today about what's wrong with compliance and how we manage it today, what we're doing about it in Container Solutions, and where we're going to go with it. Okay. And oh yeah, and I think revolution is coming in this space for external reasons. So there's a few quite significant factors that are making this space going to move on. So as I mentioned, I'm a consulting partner at Container Solutions. I'm an engineer and architect by background. If you've ever placed a sports bet in the last 20 years, it's probably gone through code I've written. I spent 15 years working in an back-end system, online gambling back-end systems company. There's basically only one. I built them, then led teams, then ran those. And through that, I got into Docker because I got frustrated about the lack of test environments. And I got into Docker, and then through Docker, I got a job at a major UK bank as an architect, where I implemented OpenShift. And then I worked for another bank, and then I became a consultant. I blog at zwischenzugs.com. Zwischenzugs combines a few of my interests. So it's a very odd name. It's a German word from chess, meaning in-between move. So I speak German, my mother's Austrian. I play chess, and my blog was an in-between move at work. So that's why I called it that, but unfortunately it's almost impossible for people to spell. And I'm an author and O'Reilly trainer. So I've written a book I wrote Docker in Practice about 6-7 years ago. And I've also written Learn Git, Bash, Terraform the hard way. And I teach for O'Reilly Git, Bash software architecture courses. A little bit about Container Solutions. We've written open source projects before. So if anyone here uses Kubernetes, hands up if you do. Yes, lots of you, good. And if you do you use external secrets operator? Okay, so that was written by us and merged with GoDaddy. And is now, thank you. And now is, and the main architect of that is now running his own company called External Secrets Inc. So yeah, so we also wrote the operator SDK in Java for Kubernetes, and that's been taken over by Red Hat, who kindly pay for its development now. Okay, so part one. What is wrong with compliance and audit today? So I'm just going to divide compliance and audit into two broad areas. So one is controls, the things that are done to keep you compliant, and audits, the checking that you're compliant. So in terms of controls, the ones I was most familiar with before I asked ChatGPT was preventative, reactive, and detective. So preventative, as many of you will know, is configuring a system such that it can't spin up a VM with a public IP, for example, or configuring your cloud provider so that you can't open up certain ports to the world. Then you've got reactive controls, so you can spin up a VM, but something will be watching and will then smite that VM if it's not conforming to spec. Then there's directive, the things we don't read or which we're supposedly trained on and have to sit through multiple choice questions on regularly. Then there's deterrent, fines, pretty much, financial penalties or other penalties for failing to comply. Compensating, which is if someone doesn't comply, are the things we can do to reduce the effect of that. And finally, detective. And detective is the area where I think we're not doing enough at the moment. We're not doing enough to see, to be aware whether there are issues. When we do detective controls at the moment, they tend to be distributed across the estate. So one of the things as we've taken this and showed this to people, one of the things they've said is, I've got 20 different systems that tell me about vulnerabilities. If something happens, I have to go and check 16 different places. Another thing we've heard from in various industries is from compliance managers is that they have a lot of third parties that they work with, and they're sort of semi-federated. So if you work for a big oil and gas company, you've just bought 20 businesses, and you're trying to integrate them into your systems. You don't know what they're up to. You don't know what they're complying with, not complying with, and there's an element of trust or not really knowing what's going on. This other challenge, even if you don't have that problem, you've still got the hybrid world. So I'm guessing most of the people in this room are on more than one cloud, or if they were on one cloud, they might be buying another business, and that business is on another cloud, or one business unit is on one cloud, another business unit is on another. That's all very common. So we're in a hybrid world, and if you're in charge of compliance for that whole business, then it's not clear necessarily where you need to go to check things. So that's controls. Now, in terms of audit, checking that we're compliant, there's sort of 4 problems that we think are happening at the moment. So first is it's manual. I mentioned Confluence, Pages, Spreadsheets. Whenever I mention those, people smile and say, yes, we do that too. There must be a better way. Audits are often also done with screenshots, and they can be put into PDFs. And all these things are used to track state against specific controls. So in a way, audits are done typically manually and haven't been brought into the ops portmanteaus that we've seen with other things. We've got DevSecOps and so on, but we haven't got Dev Audit Ops. It's not been shifted left yet. So that's a typical kind of spreadsheet that some of you may be familiar with looking at over and over again, maybe every 6 months or so. Second problem with audits is that they're periodic. So they might happen every N months, often every 6 months or every 12 months. When I put OpenShift live at that bank, we were checked every year by security auditors who would come in, ask us questions. Are you encrypting your disks? Are you using Kubernetes secrets? Have you got a encrypted secret store? That kind of thing. Very manual process. You have to be phoned up, you have to be told. Between those periods, who knows what happens? Maybe you patch something, maybe your teams patch something to make it look okay for that week, and then they reverted to their old ways. Do you know what's going on? If an auditor comes in and says, do you know what's going on? Can you show them? No, you can just say, here's our report from 3 months ago, and we reckon everything's the same, Gov. Recently I spoke to a consultant who works for a big European bank and about this, and he said it's really interesting, but at the moment we're not even doing point in time properly. So even in a lot of these cases, people are way behind the curve. And as I'll mention, there's regulation coming that means that they're going to have to really up their game soon. Okay, next problem is that their audits tend to be very process-focused. So they focus on the documentation of processes rather than working processes. And as I was writing that, I was reminded, I thought I've heard that somewhere before, and it was the Agile Manifesto, which talks about working software over comprehensive documentation. Audits are not agile. Right? They're the antithesis of agile at the moment. Evidence is taken periodically and manually, so not uncommon to have screenshots and so on. And the effectiveness of these processes over time is simply not measured. And finally, it's bespoke. So if I work for one bank, they might have one format for their audit documents, They're compliance documents. If I work for another, they might do it a different way. There's no interoperation between systems. There's no interoperation between teams. So the question is, why is it like this? Why have we ended up in this state? I like this one. I don't know if you can see that. It says, all you've done is chisel all day. Do something useful, like help your brother drag those rocks up the hill. I like this image. It's like the other one where the guys are holding the stone wheels and someone else says, oh, we're too busy to look at those. But I like the sort of, the fact that it's a child and he's seen as playing. So traditionally, audit and compliance has been seen as two things. It's a side activity that comes along periodically that you have to deal with, and therefore it's treated like a tax. It's just something we have to do because we have to do it, and we're not interested in dwelling on it. We don't really want to talk to those people. Sorry, do we have any auditors in the room? I'm speaking for us, but I don't know who us is. Okay, no auditors in the room. Well, this is kind of illustrative, right? You would never get someone who works in IT audit necessarily coming to a conference like this, or, well, rarely, it seems. So that's indicative of how, actually, how many people work in security? Right, so we've got more hands for security. So there's a real sort of siloization of this, and I think it can be broken down. Now, because it's manual and it's a tax, it's not scalable, and we're going to see that the development of regulations is going to mean that it's going to have to be scalable. Compliance and audit has been very resistant to innovation, although actually, I have a little anecdote here. So when I got into Docker, at that gambling company, I built a system, I built a automation which shoved a whole 3-tier set of applications into a single container. And I did that for development purposes, so that developers could just easily move around their changes to each other, and we could get some sort of CI going. This was in 2013. And as I was doing this, someone at one of the bookmakers got wind of this and said, oh, we've got an audit coming up where we have to demonstrate to an escrow, well, demonstrate to a third party that we can rebuild this company's whole system from scratch if there's a disaster. So if all their data centers got bombed, could we rebuild the system? And I was like, okay, yeah, no, traditionally this had taken a week. And I'd got this process down to a couple of hours with a Docker image build. And I went to the audit, well, I went with the tech lead to the auditor and said, well, we've got this new method of doing it. Are you okay with that? And they said, what the hell is Docker? Never heard of it. And we showed them it, and they said, yeah, that'll do. I can see the website. It's running on your machine, and yeah, you've rebuilt it. I've observed that. They took some screenshots and told the escrow they were happy. So if you do engage with them, they can be very, very reasonable, is my experience based on that. The other reason it's like this is that only recently lots of industries have got into needing to be compliant, either for internal reasons or external reasons. So 25 years ago, I just graduated, and within a year, I had root access to the production database of a FTSE 100 company, which was, revenue of millions and millions at the time. And I remember saying to someone, "This is a bit crazy that I can do this," and no one would know it's me. They only have the IP address of my company to know that it was me. Could have been anyone, but it was a very high trust environment. And I think a lot of businesses were like that. Post 2008, I think things have tightened up a lot. So more and more companies are either internally pushing for compliance or externally pushing for compliance. So I think it's part of the increasing professionalization. Okay, so it's not in a great state, but who cares, right? Who cares? We're paying the tax, whatever. The tax is, to give you an idea, apparently 10% of banking 10% of banking operational costs is spent on compliance. That was according to McKinsey. Now, not all of that is software compliance, but a fair chunk of it is, and an increasing chunk. After 2008, the regulators around the world really focused on financial stability. So they focused on making sure that the banks didn't go bust, and that was obviously really important. But now that's sort of become a lot more stable, they're moving to looking at operational stability. So we've got various changes going on in the world that are pushing us towards a more bigger focus on operational security. So one of these is DORA, which is the Digital Operational Resilience Act in the EU, which has gone into effect this year, but no one really knows exactly what it means. So it's classic EU regulation, which is saying things should be better, and then over the coming years, it will become clearer and clearer what that means. We all know about GDPR. Another factor around this is that more and more regulators are introducing machine-readable regulations. They're publishing machine-readable regulations. So Australia is leading the way on this. And so a lot of Australian banks are looking at automating a lot of their compliance lifecycle. And yeah, the UK also has an operational resilience rules that have changed. So some quotes from there. Regulators in the UK operational resilience rules, regulators stress reliance is not a once and done tick box exercise, but must be embedded into the firm's culture. So that's a new thing. Firms are expected to continuously identify vulnerabilities and remediate them via regular testing. Ongoing third-party oversight is required, meaning continuous monitoring of vendor performance. Adoption of mapping and simulation tools to constantly test systems. So that's the UK operational resilience rules. DORA talks about continuous testing, monitoring, and reporting of ICT systems, and so on and so on. So, what are we going to do about it? So we've built this tool called Continuous Compliance Framework. It's available on GitHub, and it's only really become a real product in the last couple of months. So before that, we spent a lot of time working on the back end and the infrastructure around it, but now we're ready to talk about it. So I've got videos, but I'll do it live because it's probably going to be a better demo if I can find it. Here we go. So this is the sort of main page of the Continuous Compliance Framework. So this is all the findings we have. So in this demo, I've got some AWS stuff. I've got an AWS VPC with things in it. I've got an Azure subscription with things in it. And I've got a couple of Docker containers representing on-prem machines. And each line here represents a single stream of information. So it's like a monitoring tool. And each stream of information is, by default, every minute, but is periodic. So I can set it to whatever I want. But if I look here, I can see there's a history. And if I go down here, this check was collected at 10:26. The explicit security group on this instance is satisfied. The subject of this finding is here. And there's observations. So these are all OSCAL terms. So they're standardized terms within the industry. And then for each of these, you can drill down and see what happened to gather the evidence. So if I go back to these findings, for each of these findings, there are flags. So maybe I'll make that slightly bigger so you can see it. When you set up a stream of checks, you specify also flags. So anyone familiar with Kubernetes, similar idea of labels. And I can take these labels and query against them. So if I do type equals AWS and service equals EC2, then I can narrow down my findings to those specific things. So if you're in charge of compliance and a vulnerability to the public has come up, you might want to just quickly figure out what may be exposed. If I do this, I can then save that search. So I can say AWS EC2, and then it will be added to my dashboards here. So I can keep track of different things as the auditor. Now, I can also view by subject. So a subject is a component in the system. So for example, I've got an EC2 instance, and there are streams of findings for that particular instance. Two are positive, two are negative. I've got an Azure virtual machine, 1 positive, 3 negative, and so on. And again, if I go into each one, I can view the details. So at the moment, we're writing plugins to integrate with other tools, such as Sneak, Black Duck, whatever. We're not in the business of identifying specific vulnerabilities. There's companies that do that way better. What we're in the business of is trying to centralize and coordinate that so that this is more easily managed by a compliance manager. Okay, so we've done subject. Oh yeah, so the last thing is catalogs. So OSCAL has this concept of control catalog, which is sets of controls that you have to work against. So for example, that might be NIST SP 853, which, if you don't know, is a very standardized set of cybersecurity controls that businesses reference. And they have different levels of severity depending on how significant your system is to the infrastructure of the nation. But we've done some work recently to integrate this with the Saudi Arabian Money Authority, and you can actually tie each individual control to the findings we've got. So if an auditor comes in and says, we don't think you're complying, or if an auditor says, we caught a bank that was completely exposed and we weren't aware of it and they were down for 3 days because they weren't complying with 3.3.1, what are you doing about that? Well, I can say, actually, we're not doing so well on that because we're all red. So I could then quickly phone those people up and say, sort that out now, and the auditor might go away happy. Or if it's something, where are we? If it's something we're stronger on, like infrastructure findings, then we can show them that. So it's basically we're gathering those data, gathering that evidence and those streams of data, and then being able to slice and dice in different ways depending on who's looking. Okay. So if I go back to slideshow. Okay, so why we got here. So the reason we started this project was because we were in a meeting, or one of my teams was in a meeting with a bank, with a CISO, and going over these Confluence pages. And the CISO said, there must be a better way to do this than the way we're doing it. And one of our engineers said, yeah, sure, we've talked about this before internally, and we think we can make it better. And he said, okay, go off and build something. And that bank promptly went bust. You can probably tell who it is from if you look it up. They went bust soon after that. So we were left with this project that we started and was in very early stages. And then 2023 was not a great year for consultancies, so we had quite a big bench. And so we started working on this, and we showed it to potential clients who said, great, when can we install it? And we said, no, we're not ready for that. We're very far from ready for that. So we thought, okay, there's something here. So then we went away and built the back end properly, and architected the back end properly. And now we're getting to the point where we've got something real to show people. So architecturally, it's agent-based. So the agent's written in Golang. And the agent is very small, can run anywhere, limited capability, et cetera, et cetera. There is a plugin policy separation. So the agent runs, and it defines the policies it's interested in looking at on the particular, in the context it's in. So if it's a machine and it's checking the SSH configuration, then it'll be simply running on that machine. If it's a collating plugin, so for example, I want to check that all my AWS EC2 instances are a certain way, then I might have a machine specifically deployed for that reason, and then it would go off and collect all that information and then send it back. So that's the plugin, and then the policy is written against the plugin. So and there's separation between those. So you can configure it to check whatever you like. Configuration is done at the moment using Rego, which a lot of people aren't really comfortable with, and I hear my engineers swearing about it a lot. But it's the principal policy tool at the moment. We're probably going to add support for Kyverno at some point. But yes, plugin policy separation is critical. Plugins and policies are both pulled from OCI registries. So little known feature of OCI registries is you can just treat it like an artifact tool and just download specific files. So that's what we do. We download specific files from OCI registries. If you've got a Docker registry, you can use this. And we use MongoDB for the backend, for the data store, because OSCAL is written is in JSON. So it's a set of OSCAL is essentially a set of documents that you use to represent your compliance workflow. So at the center of here, you've got the CCF API. You've got agents running on different machines. You've potentially got agents that connect to third-party tools that you want to have policy against. I'm often asked, would your system support XYZ? As long as you can turn it into JSON, or as long as there's consistent output, in fact, the system can have policies written against it and therefore send results back to the center. So it's designed to be a very open, flexible architecture. It's all open source, as I said, so anyone can use it. I'll talk a little bit about OSCAL. I've mentioned it a few times. So OSCAL is a standard written by NIST, and it's been in existence for about 8 years, I think, and 1.0 for about 2 years. And I can never remember the acronym. So it's Open Security Controls Assessment Language. I always want to call it Open Source Controls something. I can never remember it. But it allows you to produce documents like this, which are machine readable. So the idea is that if someone writes a tool for OSCAL from the compliance side, they can output documents that can be read in by someone from the regulator side or development team side, and they can use their own tools to interpret it. So it's just sort of standardizing. The thing I talked about earlier about everything is bespoke in this field, this is reducing that significantly. So we decided to go all in on OSCAL. It's a very ornate standard. It's quite hard, it's quite opaque to understand. And we've actually implemented our own training course for our own engineers on it because it's actually quite hard to follow. However, the more you understand it, the more you realize how much thought has been put into it and how difficult it is to have a standard that covers thousands and thousands of different organizations and tries to bring them together. Through building this, we're talking to we're talking to NIST about some of the changes we'd like to make in future editions of OSCAL. So the big one is that OSCAL is built around point-in-time compliance. So it's really reflecting that existing state of things. And we've had to add concepts like the labels, like the streaming of data that is consistent with the continuous world. So I think we're going to be influencing the changes in OSCAL in the future. And if anyone's interested, let me know, because there's a working group on it as well. So a little bit more on OSCAL there. There's different layers across the life cycle. I wrote a tool to help me understand OSCAL using Neo4j. So this is a visualization of the OSCAL schema. It helped me understand the relationships between the different parts of it. If anyone's interested in that, it's available online. It's Dockerized, so anyone can spin it up. Okay, so what lessons have we learned building this so far? So we've found no competition to what we're doing exactly. So if there is competition, it tends to be point in time or very, very expensive, not open source, and not holistic, and not using open standards. And we've noticed that other people are focusing very much from a compliance orientation, whereas we could come from more of a developer. We don't want to spend our time doing these spreadsheets. So we're coming at the same concepts from a slightly different angle. But I think we're coming together as we explore more of the OSCAL standard. Still debating whether to go with MongoDB. I'm very old-fashioned. I like relational databases. But we're still with MongoDB. I think we'll hit performance problems at some point, but that's for a later time to think about. And the big thing for me was the use case refinement. So as we started showing it to people, we were initially talking very much about regulation and OSCAL, and the people we're talking to are saying, this can really help me sleep at night. So I talked to one person who has 200 engineers working under him, and he said he has no idea what they're doing. And if an auditor comes and asks him what's his understanding of how he's controlling the entire dev lifecycle, he has no idea. He has the artifacts that he's written. He's got the PDFs and so on, the documentation of processes, but he doesn't know what's actually happening. So he's living in fear that bad practices are going on and he's not aware of it. So we've switched more to the help me sleep at night scenario. But we want to continue, because we think the regulation changes are so important, we want to continue with the regulatory point of view as well. Okay, closing up now. So where we're going with this, as I say, we're focusing on sleep at night use cases. Well, we would like to be the central standard for central control management. We'd like it to remain open source. We're building more plugins and integrations with whatever is being driven by the user. The other thing we're doing is probably going to get more and more involved in the SDLC, compliance in the SDLC cycle. So software composition analysis, static application security testing, dynamic application security testing, bill of materials. Those are things we're probably going to be getting more into. Even things like joiners, movers, leavers. Every company has a joiners, movers, leavers process. How do you know that your leavers are having their credentials revoked? That kind of question is something we think there's mileage in. At the extremes, we're thinking about, do we want to have distributed CCF instances? So if your company has a CCF instance, another company has a CCF instance, if they talk to each other, they could exchange information about the controls they're tracking and not tracking and so on. So I think that's an interesting, but that's very much for the future. And in my head, I envision like a Terraform world where you've got these public plugins that anyone can use, and they're standardized and they're usable by anyone. So it doesn't take long to write the plugin, especially with ChatGPT. I can show you the code if you want. I'm running out of time, so I won't show you now. But yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
I'm sure there must be some questions. I'm looking around. One in the middle.
Thank you, Ian. It was really a good talk. I just wanted to ask, how do you handle subjective requirements? Example, somebody should have a SOC to report, or pen test should be done when major changes are done. These kind of requirements in the compliance.
Sorry, I didn't catch the question.
So how do you handle subjective requirements? Example, somebody should have a SOC to report. Now I can attach any PDF report into it as a compliance.
Okay. Yeah, great question. So I think if I can interpret the question slightly to my benefit, you said subjective requirements. So for example, things that aren't automatable, so easily automatable. Yeah, a feature we can easily build in to this is store my manual test in, store my manual control auditing in here. But that would just require a form and somewhere to store it. So we focused very much on the automated side for the big wins. But yeah, if a customer came along and said, we want you to build something that captures those things, we could do that. If it can be automated, we want to automate it. So even there, I think there might be scope for adding other things. But yeah, there's certain things like, is my data center does my data center have a backup generator? It's hard to generate JSON for that. So someone has to go and physically look and say, yes, I've seen it. So I think that's coming down the pipe.
Interesting talk, thanks. Have you thought at all about like taking actions off the back of the findings as well, and like maybe auto-remediating stuff or like intercepting things before it gets a chance to go bad?
Yes. So one of the first people we showed it to said, "Oh, could you take action and basically go and change a Git repo based on it?" And we sort of went, "Oh yeah, you could do that. You could even automate the change with AI and automate the pull request and take it away from the developers." That particular person was complaining to me. He was an engineering manager, and he said, all my engineers are complaining that 50% of their time is spent on compliance. And I think they're full of it. So I'd like to take away all the excuses. Yes, we could do that. It would require engineering. So we're waiting for someone to ask us to pay us to build it, basically. Hi.
Hiya. I'm really excited to see this development, as exciting as compliance can be. But just a question around sort of data sovereignty and talking about how you store the data. Mm-hmm. How is that partitioned? If you've got different customers, how is that data secure?
Yeah, okay. So it's not a SaaS.
Right.
We don't want to get into the business of being a SaaS, mainly for the reasons that you describe. So we assume that if you're a top-tier bank who want to implement this, you'd want to store it on-prem, run it on your own infrastructure. So we've made it easy for you to run it on your own infrastructure. We haven't given any thought to running it as a SaaS because of that challenge. I mean, you're going to have this is going to have some sort of connection to all the systems of a client. That's going to open up a lot of security questions, and then you're going to have data streaming out, which is going to be sensitive. So names of machines, IP addresses. I can't see many banks wanting to give us that information.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, thank you for innovating in the space. My question is, you talked earlier about the siloing between tech and audit.
Yeah.
As a tech team, who do you think should be excited to install a service like that? My audit team or the tech team, as me trying to be compliant?
That is a really, really important question, right? Who should be excited by this? So if I'm an auditor, I'm getting well paid to go around taking screenshots of things. Quite happy, it's paying the mortgage. If I'm a developer, it's just annoying. I don't want to deal with this stuff. The people we're really targeting is the people who can't sleep at night. So it's the compliance leader who wants to have answers for auditors, for regulators when they come in. That's the person we think is going to be excited about it. I hope engineers will be excited by it because it's automation and they can spend more time writing features or whatever it is they want to do. But yeah, it's the leaders. And interestingly, another thing we've learned as we've shown it to people, it's not just compliance people who are interested, it's engineering managers who are really interested in this. So we spoke to, for example, we spoke to a retail CIO who said, yeah, great regulators, whatever, but I get phoned on a Friday that a third party that we work with has opened up hundreds of VMs to the public, potentially exposing data. They get on a call, priority one call, and then they find 18 other problems. They said, I would like to see that earlier, and I would like to be able to send an email to that team and say, you're not compliant, go fix it, and don't come to me if it doesn't work. A CYA process for them. So I think it's those, any sort of leader who's responsible for the work of other people.
I've spent some time working with Azure policies, which is a similar concept, even though it's probably proprietary, their format. Installing this on a Kubernetes cluster running AKS would yield 2 different compliance reports. So is there any interest in the industry for standardization? And is there have you been approached by other vendors?
We're talking to vendors in adjacent areas. So a lot of people are interested in this tool adding to their armory. So this tool is not going to solve all your controls problems, compliance problems. You should have reactive controls. You should have preventative controls. This is very much aimed at the person responsible for things across different systems. So you mentioned Azure policies. Yeah, if you're just using Azure, Azure policies is fine for you. It's those people who have 6 different data centers, 3 different cloud service providers, the polyglot group of people who just want to have a single point of view. It's those people that we're targeting. But yeah, so we thought we'd get a negative reaction from vendors, but actually they're very welcoming of this because they see it as something they can plug into and show their clients. So for example, we talked to some vendors and they said, yeah, our clients are always complaining they've got 8 different systems like ours. If we have this thing, then we can solve that problem for them. So yeah, so we are getting positive feedback on that.
I think we're just out of time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.